Harassment claims against Congressman John Conyers, plus a closer look at the deal over Line 5 and the safety debate. And Brian Calley gets in the 18 governor's race. Stay put, My Week starts right now.
Did you know Gordon Food Service was started by a 23-year-old entrepreneur as a butter and egg delivery business more than a century ago? In 1948, school teacher Gerard Wendell Hayworth borrowed $10,000 from his parents to start a woodworking operation in his family's garage. It's now Hayworth Incorporated. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Funding for this program is provided by Delta Airlines. Keep climbing.
Welcome to My Week. I'm Christy McDonald, and what a week it has been. We'll take a look at the debate over Line 5 under the Straits of Mackinac and if this week's deal will really protect the Great Lakes. Plus, the governor's race is getting a little bit more crowded. But we are starting with a national conversation over sexual harassment that has hit everywhere, from Hollywood to high-priced TV anchors, and has also zeroed in on allegations involving Congressman John Conyers. Reports say he's being urged to resign. He is home in Detroit, missing votes in the House, ironically, on mandatory sexual harassment training for congressional staffers. He stepped down from his leadership role on the Judiciary Committee and is said to be weighing his options. One of the troubling aspects of the accusations is the alleged use of office funds for harassment settlement. Let's start there with our contributors. Stephen Henderson from the Detroit Free Press is here. Nolan Finley is off, so joining us back on My Week is Daniel House, columnist at the Detroit News. Daniel, welcome back to My Week. It's good to have you.
Thanks.
And really, what a week it has been. We do have news that on Wednesday night into Thursday, Congressman John Conyers was taken to the hospital. He is hospitalized right now, and friends are saying this because of the stress of the allegations and the media presence that's actually been surrounding him and looking for answers from him. He has not come out and said anything yet. And Stephen, actually, you were just also looking online saying that Nancy Pelosi has called for his resignation.
I saw a tweet that said that she is saying he should resign, and that's that's been a growing chorus throughout the week among not just people outside the Congress, but inside the Congress, who have been saying, at least privately, that this seems to stretch the bounds of acceptable behavior for a congressman. And I think it's clear to everybody it's not just about the allegations against him. It is about the way this was handled, the extraordinary way it was handled, with office funds for a no-show job. I mean, these are things that are just so far beyond the pale, I think, that people are like, there's not a way to recover from them.
And that's what I want to ask you, Daniel. This kind of does move out of just, it's not a simple sexual harassment case where you're looking at what a couple of allegations have been and what a congressman would say in retaliation to that, but how office funds may have been used and what kind of compliance that you get from Congress and what kind of system could be changed here in the future.
Well, I think this really exposes Congress as a follower here on this issue than a leader. You know, it's hard to call corporate America the champions of women in this situation, but when you look at what corporations are doing faced with these allegations and how quickly they are moving compared to Congress, it's pretty remarkable. And I think this does suggest that they have to move more quickly on these kinds of things. They can't brush them under the rug, and they sure as heck can't use taxpayer funds to pay off people to be quiet.
You know, I think it's interesting, though, when you do compare that, and a lot of people have been talking about, well, you see NBC move very quickly against Matt Lauer, CBS against Charlie Rose, and the list of other men who have been removed from high-powered positions. Russell Simmons just stepped down from his head at Def Jam Records. But you had those are corporations who are paying Matt Lauer, who are paying Charlie Rose to do a job. We, the citizens, or John Conyers' electorate, they're the ones that put him in that job. Should they be the ones to remove him from that job, Stephen?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I mean, so you have to separate Conyers out here from everybody else, right? You've got this system in the House, at least, that appears to try to handle these things by protecting the identity of the accused. This House Compliance Office process is very murky and sort of all behind the curtain, by which these cases get settled, again with public money. But there's a process and there is some oversight to it. What Congressman Conyers is accused of doing is saying, I'm going to opt out of that system, murky and untransparent as it is, and develop my own system where I use money that is in my own office to settle this on my own. And this week, Candace Miller said that when she was in the House, she saw this deal and said, absolutely not. And so you've got two problems. One is this sort of rogue nature of what Conyers did, but the system itself that he opted out of is also not transparent enough, not public enough. We had no idea. There are millions of dollars that have been spent in settlements through this that we had never heard of before. Congress has to take a look at that too, in addition to what happens to Conyers.
Daniel.
If you want an example of the swamp, this is an example of the swamp. And what this reminds me of institutionally is the Catholic Church sexual abuse scandals, where all this stuff was going on and cardinals and bishops were hiding things from their parishioners. And it finally took, in this case, the Boston Globe and others to report about this. And I was in Rome reporting at the time when they were issuing the reports on this, and there was a lot of shame that went around. And I don't think this is that different. It may be different in scale, I think, clearly, but I think institutionally it's similar.
It's the same.
I think when we had the larger conversation about sexual harassment issues and complaints that have been made, a lot of the conversation surrounds around the enablers and the people that knew, and what you're talking about, the moving of people from place to place, or kind of saying, put it to the side. I want to talk about John Conyers, though, and what this does to his legacy potentially. Now, again, we've taped this show a couple of hours before it actually airs, so there's a lot of time for some different things to happen. What this does to a storied career of a congressman who fought for civil rights and is a hero to the people who have elected him year after year tirelessly.
Yeah, and I've said before, John Conyers is one of my heroes, dating back to when I was a small child growing up here in Detroit. I mean, he was someone whose actions demonstrated over and over again his commitment to justice, to civil rights, to equality, often in the face of real opposition, often in the face of threatened violence. There's no question about his place in our history locally or nationally. But at the same time, you know, I'm the editorial page editor at the Detroit Free Press, and we decided last week that what he's done here means he has to resign. And I think you can manage those two truths in an honest and an intellectually honest way. What he did before and what he's meant to this community could never be changed. But right now, what he's done means he can't be the person who represents us in the Congress anymore. The betrayal of trust represented by that settlement is so severe and so irreparable that I think he has to go.
Daniel, is that too early of a call, though? Should we have the House Ethics Committee take a look at this first? Do we need to see things play out before he should resign?
No. I mean, I think he can make that call. And I've heard a number of his colleagues, Democratic colleagues, asked about this in media interviews, and they don't answer the question. But what they do say is that's up to him. And I would submit that the longer this goes on, the more damage there's going to be to his legacy. And there are have been a lot of great politicians and a lot of great figures who have mixed legacies, to Stephen's point. And this may not be any different.
So that's up to him. The decision is up to him, and obviously the people who are surrounding him right now. Stephen, give me a sense of who that is and what kind of conversations you think that are being had right now.
I mean, I think, you know, certainly his wife and his family is with him, and that's important because I think it is a stressful time for him, and that's not the most important thing we should be thinking about, but it is something we should be considering. I know that there have been a lot of conversations in Congress about this among the different constituencies. The Congressional Black Caucus has had a lot of conversations about this. There are members there who pushed to have him step down as chair of Judiciary, want him to leave. Now you've got the former speaker, the minority leader, saying the same thing. That's the group that I think will ultimately help him decide what he's going to do.
The longer he stays, he runs the risk that more and more people come out, and it's just going to do greater and greater damage to the party in Congress. And I think that's what they're looking at right now, is what's the cost-benefit analysis here. He's 88 years old. He's had a great run. It's time. We don't need to go down this road and suffer the slings and arrows, as it were.
Can you imagine what these hearings will look like? Talking about the things that these accusers are saying.
Well, and Marion Brown was on, one of the accusers was on the Today Show actually on Thursday morning. You are set, are you supposed to be working to talk with her this afternoon?
I mean, the story she's telling is mind-blowing. You can't imagine, I can't imagine someone like John Conyers, who I've known personally for many years and not just looked up to. I can't imagine him doing these things. And I think Daniel's right. The more you hear about this stuff, the more we play this out in hearings, in documents, in investigations, it does not serve his interests or hers. I also don't think it serves his constituents' interests.
I think that's exactly right. And his legacy would just continue to be eroded by continuing revolution.
You know, I wonder, the next part of the conversation, in looking at Marion Brown talking about this right now and breaking that non-disclosure agreement that she has, well, is there going to be a larger conversation about should these agreements even be in place, and what's the ramifications of her going beyond something that she signed, saying this is going to be a confidential agreement?
That's a really great question. These kinds of agreements are used in all sorts of employment disputes, and some of which have nothing to do with sexual harassment. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is it different when it's with a member of Congress than when it's with a private corporation? Maybe. Is it less enforceable? Possibly. But this is how business is done, and I think a lot of people are being reminded that this is kind of the seedier side of how these relationships work. I don't think she's going to pay a price for it in terms of legally. There may be a lot of media pressure, but I don't think she's going to pay a price for it.
I'll let you get the last word on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got to reform the way Congress deals with this altogether. And this question about the non-disclosure agreements, I think is worth hashing out, because the primary thing you want to do is protect the accuser, right? I mean, there's already too much burden on the people who suffer this abuse to have to come forward and go through this crazy process in Congress by which they are doubted from the jump in terms of the veracity of what they're saying. That's what we have to sort of worry about. And the non-disclosure agreement, does that protect the accuser, or does that put them in a more precarious position? I don't really know the answer to that, but I think that's what we need to be talking about.
All right. Well, turning now to a deal this week brokered between Governor Snyder and Enbridge, the company that runs the controversial oil line number 5 under the Straits of Mackinac. The Canadian company agreed to be more accountable for maintenance, monitoring, future safety studies, and it supposedly will lead to more transparency. This from a company who has concealed information about the condition of that 64-year-old line, pumping 23 million gallons of petroleum products a day. But this deal has nothing to do with shutting down the line entirely or planning on a different way to transport oil that doesn't put the Great Lakes smack in the middle of a potential environmental disaster. Governor Snyder says this agreement is a proactive and transparent one and important in terms of trust. Activists continue to sound the alarm that the only thing safe for the lakes is to shut the line down.
Shut down! Shut down Oilers! Water spoilers!
This is a pipeline that was designed to last for a certain number of years back in the 1950s, and it has exceeded that life expectancy. And so really we're living on borrowed time. And although the company Enbridge says that they're maintaining the pipeline, it seems like every month or two we're hearing some new report about missing lining on the pipeline, or about dents, or problems with supports underneath the pipeline. And so you don't have a feeling of comfort and a feeling of everything's going to be okay. This is a pipeline that has already outlived its expected life cycle.
The freshwater drinking source for millions of people, our economy. I mean, it's unfathomable that we don't have the highest standards for this company and that we're not asking the most of them. And the state is completely dropping the ball at this point and requiring them to shut down this pipeline and get it out of there.
Now, Enbridge did say it will work hard to gain the state's trust. And remember, it was Enbridge who was responsible for the oil spill in the Kalamazoo River about 7 years ago. Daniel, let me start with you, because you wrote a column about this week, saying, you're never going to satisfy both sides, especially in, in the environmental people who have been pushing for years now to shut this line down. But is this agreement that the governor entered into this week, is it enough to protect the lakes, or is really the only protection is to find another way to deliver the oil?
Well, there's a lot of people that say that it should be delivered another way, that most of the consumption of the product that goes through that line is Canadian, and that going into Michigan and across Michigan waters is really a geographical convenience. It's not necessarily necessary. I think, whether or not they're going to, I think the likelihood that they move that line is probably less than taking some of the measures that they're agreeing to take. What's clear to me is that Enbridge has come to the conclusion that they are going to have to remove their pipeline from contact with the Great Lakes. So whether that means putting in a concrete tunnel underneath the Great Lakes or some other way, they don't have a whole lot of choice. The governor, I think, is also in a situation, looking at this from kind of a macro legacy standpoint, we have got 1/5 of the world's fresh water here. We've already been blemished badly by the Flint water crisis, and that happened on his watch. You would think that if there's any state in the union that should have robust water management, it should be the state of Michigan. So, and I think he probably understands that, and he's moving very aggressively. The other thing that I think is important here is the political reality of an effort to get a ballot question on the 18 ballot. And if they do, that could cause a lot of more problems for the government of his successor, as well as for Enbridge, because now you have the people of the state of Michigan taking a position on something, and it makes things a lot harder, and that limits their options.
Okay, so you say that the move by Governor Snyder was aggressive this week. Would you agree with that?
I don't think it was that aggressive. I think, first of all, I mean, it interrupts the process that we're going through, which is trying to study this line and get accurate information about the line and the future of the line.
And there is a pipeline advisory board at the state of Michigan right now.
But does it interrupt it?
I think it interrupts it in this way. It pushes just a little bit of the thumb of the scale on the side of keeping the pipe or keeping access to the lakes for this pipeline. It says, let's try this thing that we are pretty sure is going to work a lot better, and then it puts more of the burden on the folks who say, let's get rid of this. I think your point about what the governor should be thinking about water and water management is absolutely right.
Exactly right.
And he should be saying, no way, this does not make sense. It is an accident, literally an accident waiting to happen. And the question is when, not if. And so when you're in that kind of situation, I think you say, let's talk about what the other alternatives would look like. They may be expensive, but they will not cost humanly as much.
Also looking at this deal too, and giving Enbridge the benefit of the doubt to fix the mistakes that they have made in the past and to do better.
But they're liars. I mean,
and they don't have a good track record here. And if you want to find a corporate villain, there are few more likely corporate villains than energy companies that are not transparent, right? So I think they're doing what they can do in this case. But the other thing that strikes me too is they also said that they would shut down Line 5 under the Straits of Mackinac when wave heights get...
When the conditions...
Well, I looked into that. Wave heights of 8 feet sustained for 60 minutes. Now, I've paddled on the Great Lakes, and 8-foot waves are terrifying, okay? And if they're sustained for 60 minutes, it's huge. But the reality is even when those waves are half that size, a lot of rescue groups, the Coast Guard and others,
it's not even safe enough to get there to stop
and that's part of the problem.
Well, let's talk about winter, right? Winter up there is the worst weather that we have. They're not going to stop operation of the pipeline during the winter.
And you can't get under the ice.
A winter break would be catastrophic. I mean, it would be really tough to deal with.
So it's a wait and see again, would you say?
I feel like the governor is in a wait and see, and he shouldn't be. I think he should be more, his obligation first is to the people of the state of Michigan.
Sure.
And our interests here are clear. You can't do this. He's trying to strike a balance between those interests and those of a business, and I think that's where he gets himself in trouble.
Last word, Daniel.
Business is, I've written about this twice, Michigan business is not aggressive and publicly outspoken enough about this. If something goes badly wrong, Michigan business and the Michigan economy will be very much
devastated.
affected.
Suffer. All right. Hey, just a reminder that Detroit Public TV is committed to in-depth reporting on the health of the Great Lakes. For more coverage on Line 5 and all of our reporting out of the Great Lakes Now Bureau, just head to our website, MiWeek.org. We'll have the link for you there. Finally tonight, a little politics. Not a big surprise that Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley announced he's running for governor in 2018. He says he wants to build on the success over the last 7 years. Will that be an effective enough message for Republicans? So, Stephen, you were even doubtful that he was even going to get into this. But let me ask you this first. Is let's just continue doing a great job a good thing for a slogan, a campaign slogan poster?
Probably not. I mean, I am mystified over and over again by Brian Calley and the delay in his sort of emergence as a stronger, more sort of innovative and aggressive political thinker. And, you know, I mean, this is a guy in a party that I don't think that much of, but I really see him as somebody with great potential to be a leader in that party, and he just shines from it each time. And this slogan, some of the things he's already put on the table, they're all very mediocre, and some of them are just bad ideas. I don't know if maybe he's never going to get to that space, or if he's just not ready.
If you've talked to him, and I'm sure you have, like I have, you know, he's a very smart guy, but so quiet and so soft-spoken. I think the one thing he's got going for him is the economy. I mean, you're talking about at the beginning of Governor Snyder, you were almost at 14% unemployment, a little less than that. It's now around 4%. The Michigan economy has created tens of thousands of jobs. It's diversified. I mean, if you want to make the James Carville argument that it's the economy stupid, I think this is one thing that could help Republicans, despite the fact that that party usually doesn't, after 8 years, it doesn't succeed itself.
And no one's been able to do that for a long time.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, he does have the numbers in his favor, and the let's keep it going, let's keep the momentum going. You're already seeing the clash, though, between him and Bill Schuette, because they're obviously the ones who are going to be fighting the hardest for this nomination over the Flint water crisis.
Right.
And Calley saying, look, this is all politically motivated on Schuette's part to make himself look good.
Surprise. I think that's going to have some traction with some voters, but do Republican voters in a primary really care about that? I'm not sure that they do.
Yeah. They care about they care about the name calling or the political motivations, or they care about the fact that Schuette is taking on establishment.
Well, no, what I'm raising the question of is to what extent does the Flint water crisis and who had culpability for it play out in a Republican primary? I think it's a potent general election kind of question.
Correct.
I think in the Republican primary, this is a referendum on the constituency that the president built last year. Bill Schuette embraced that as aggressively as anybody in the Republican Party. Brian Calley, very late, and I was after him about this, he said, yeah, that's not for me, that's not okay. It's going to be a test of how strong that constituency is here in Michigan. Is this going to be a Republican Party that reflects what's happening at the national level, or is it going to be a Republican Party that goes back toward the middle and toward, frankly, some sanity?
What are you sensing, Daniel, in that regard?
That's a great question. I mean, I always thought, you know, Michigan Republicans are redder than, say, Ohio Republicans. And I don't really know the answer to that, but I think some of the leadership in the party is more middle of the road, what he's talking about. And I'm not at all convinced that the Trump coalition in Michigan is going to hold together next year or even in 2020.
All right, time is going to tell. Daniel Howes, thanks so much for joining us. It's always good to see you. And that's going to do it for us. You can read Daniel Howes in the Detroit News. Plus, MiWeek is on Twitter and Facebook. Check us out there during the week. For all of us at Detroit Public TV, I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next Thursday for MiWeek. Of course, always thanks for joining us too, Stephen.
I'm always here.
Yeah.